Hey everyone, and happy Friday. So, we talked about some IRS whistleblowers a while back. That was like a couple of months ago that they came forward explaining how they weren't allowed to investigate Hunter Biden or Joe Biden when signs of tax evasion and suspicious activity reports were piling up from various banks. And we have some updates on that. So we're going to go over that because I think it's pretty like in your face what's happening here. So I want to lay it all out so everyone can make their own opinion. But this week, the House Ways and Means Committee held a press conference that had alarming new information on this whole alleged Biden bribery scheme. And since the whistleblower testimony, additional IRS witnesses have come forward for transcribed interviews after they were subpoenaed by the committee. So Representative Jason Smith laid out the new information as follows. So then Vice President Joe Biden's political influence was the brand that was for sale all over the world used to swap U.S. policy decisions. And they had found a WhatsApp message on June 6th, 2017, where Hunter Biden explicitly wrote to a business associate that he was not willing to, quote, sign over my family's brand, end quote, or to give this individual, quote, the keys to my family's one asset. And of course, that one asset must be Joe Biden. And the IRS investigators provided worksheets as part of this investigation into Hunter Biden's tax crimes, which connect his business activities to official government activity while his father, Joe Biden, was vice president of the United States. And this evidence proves, quote, there was in fact a connection between Hunter Biden's global influence peddling, Joe Biden, and official U.S. government activity, end quote. So investigators documented multiple instances. One instance was when Joe Biden in April of 2014 went to Ukraine, and this was coordinated just days after a series of meetings with Hunter Biden, Devon Archer, and Ukrainian company officials. There was an email from an executive of Burisma to Devon Archer that said, quote, a reasonable balance could be reached about Hunter Biden, end quote. And then a month later, Hunter Biden was appointed to the board of Burisma. And then another instance where Joe Biden hosted Hunter Biden and two of his business associates at the White House in February 2014, where they had lunch in the vice president's office. And then just 3 months after that lunch, Hunter Biden sent an email to Devon Archer saying, quote, we need to get to Mexico City and cement the deal with Miguel, end quote. And records are now showing that Joe Biden used Air Force Two to fly Hunter and his business associates to this meeting in Mexico City. The next alarming fact is Hunter's role as what they call a door opener went beyond his father and extended to numerous government officials, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken. That I don't know why I'm surprised, but like, I guess we now know why everyone in this administration was completely covering for the Bidens because they were all involved. And it's looking more and more like Hunter was sort of like this broker for numerous politicians that were involved in shady foreign business deals. And we know that millions of dollars were flowing through all of these different subsidiaries and LLCs, and then finally would end up in the bank accounts of Biden family members. And these deals connected to Hunter Biden spanned across 23 countries on 4 continents.
Yeah, and it was actually $19 million in income that the Biden family received from these, various 23 countries. And you mentioned earlier the SAR reports that had been sent to the Department of Treasury from all these different financial institutions, and they were alerting to all these high dollar transfers. And it seems that there is evidence that these funds were all connected to this $19 million that was being channeled through 20 different shell companies. And the committee is describing this as, quote, an exceedingly complex chain of transactions that made it difficult to track the funds, end quote. And so now there's evidence that this money was all ultimately received by these various members of the Biden family, including Joe Biden when he was vice president, and also several of his grandkids.
Well, I mean, I'm sure his grandkids were busy, in foreign
Except for one.
businesses. I mean,
Except
come
for one.
on.
The
Oh
one
my gosh.
grandkid nobody acknowledged. Yeah.
It's just so crazy because it's like, I don't know why no one is just spelling it out. We have given so much money to Ukraine. We know that these Ukrainian officials said that they had videotape recordings or audio tape recordings of Joe Biden. Like, obviously, there's some sort of blackmail or something going on, and that's why he keeps giving money. And like, no one wants to just like point that out. And it's really irritating me because it's so obvious what's happening here. But anyhow, the committee learned that the Department of Justice, quote, took unprecedented action to impede any investigative step that could have led investigators to Joe Biden, end quote. The whistleblowers provided an email where U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf directed investigators to remove, quote, political figure one, end quote, from a search warrant. And of course, political figure one was Joe Biden. And in January 2022, this same U.S. Attorney, Leslie Wolf, declined to pursue campaign finance violations that were identified by the investigators that could have been related to more than $2 million from Kevin Morris to cover Hunter Biden's unpaid tax liabilities. And Attorney Wolf stated she is, quote, not personally interested in following the lead the investigators identified, end quote. And then James Biden, who is Joe Biden's brother, told investigators that Hunter told him to thank Kevin Morris for the payment.
Yeah, and on top of that, there was apparently an email that was written by a DOJ official that's part of this whole thing, and it was titled, quote, sensitive case heads up. And in this email, the official wrote about what he referred to as a disturbing interview with a CNN producer who basically suggested that Hunter Biden believed that his criminal case and all this tax shit was just going to go away when his dad became president.
Unbelievable. Well, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy also held a press conference where he was talking about some more evidence on this bribery scheme. And he said in February 2013, Hunter Biden went on a trip with then Vice President Joe Biden to China. And he also said that when Joe Biden was campaigning for the presidency and said his family never received money from China, not only was he wrong, but they have the receipts to prove it. So a man named Jonathan Lee sent a money wire to Hunter Biden for $250,000 from Beijing, and it was addressed to Joe Biden's home. And not only did this guy become buddies with Hunter, but apparently he also became friends with Joe Biden, so much so that Joe Biden wrote letters of recommendation for this guy's children to go to college.
Yeah, and in addition to that wire from Jonathan Lee, Hunter also received a $10,000 wire from another guy named Wang Yin, and he's another Chinese businessman that's like highly connected with the CCP. And this was also in July of 2019. And surprise, surprise, this wire was also sent to Joe Biden's Delaware home. And there's documents that are being released by the House committee that included an email that Hunter Biden sent to his Chinese business partners in 2017. And I think we've talked about this at some point. There was a deal between Hunter and this guy named Yi Yin Ming, who Hunter referred to in his emails as, quote, Chairman Yi. And this guy was an executive with CCP ties from the Chinese energy firm CEFC. And this was all related to a business deal where Hunter was trying to help this Chinese energy firm purchase a U.S. natural gas facility on Monkey Island in Louisiana. And at some point, I guess the deal fell through, but James Biden told the FBI that this company was paying Hunter Biden and his business partner, Rob Walker, several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Hunter told James, that he was making $100,000 from the Hudson West 3 deal and still getting paid after the Monkey Island deal fell through. And there was an article I read in the Epic Times that said one of the documents released by the House pertaining to this was Hunter's initial agreement with Chairman Yi. And do you know what that was for, Stephanie? Over $30 million in consulting fees over a 3-year period that was, quote, based on introductions, end quote, that Hunter would make, and that they changes to a, quote, much more lasting and lucrative arrangement, end quote, to create a holding company where they were each going to take 50%. But then Yi ended up getting arrested in 2018, so the company was dissolved, but FBI interview reports showed that agents, even in 2022, were still concerned about this deal, even though it fell through a couple of years ago. But it's like, as always, when it comes to the Biden crime family, like no matter how much evidence there is, and this is a shit ton of evidence, right? Like a shit ton.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine if it was Trump and his
Right.
kids?
Oh, I know. He would be imprisoned already. But it doesn't matter. Like, there are 3 key witnesses in this investigation. One is a forensics accountant named Bruce Dubinsky, and I guess he specializes in cases involving white collar crime and financial fraud. And he testified to this committee that even though, quote, a great deal of evidence has been collected, much more information is still needed in order to be able to make a final determination about whether or not the Biden family and its associates' businesses were involved in any improper or illicit activities, and whether those activities, if any, were connected to President Joe Biden or then Vice President Biden, end quote. And then there was another key witness, Jonathan Turley. He's the George Washington University Law School professor, and he testified, quote, while I believe that an impeachment is warranted, I do not believe that evidence currently meets the standard of a high crime and misdemeanor needed for an article of impeachment, end quote. So, like,
They're paid off.
Exactly. And and then you have the Democrats who are saying this impeachment inquiry is like a waste of time, especially because there's no resolution on the federal budget. We're on the verge of a shutdown. Richard Neal, the Democratic rep from Massachusetts, who's also a ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee that's doing this whole investigation, he's calling these hearings, quote, a distraction from my colleagues' inability to govern and from their inability to fund the government. And like, speaking of the shutdown, like, we're recording this episode, Thursday afternoon for Friday morning, and this shutdown is like a make it or break it on Saturday. And as of right now, still nothing has been resolved.
I'm telling you, like, I hope it shuts down just really quickly, not like long term, because I'm so sick of this shit. Like, I'm so sick of it. And I'm sick of them pulling this crap every single time. And you know what? Like, I've had nothing better to do today than to listen to these like impeachment hearings. And I've come to a new conclusion. I actually think that this is like a good thing. Like, instead of me being pissed off about Biden not, and everyone's saying, oh, it's not enough evidence, I'm kind of glad that it's happening, because look at how many people are waking up and realizing all of the shady bullshit going on in our government. Like, it's so obvious, no one can deny it. And I think it's really going to hurt them in the long run, because the Democrats are just showing how corrupt they really are. If they were at least like letting Joe Biden, deal with impeachment, then they could say like, oh, if there is a bad person, we stand up for what's right, but they're not. So I think in the long run, it's really going to hurt this uniparty. And I hate to say it, Tara, but like, I agree with this Richard Neal over the fact that they can't govern. I mean, at this point, I think that we need to realize that the Republican Party is non-existent. It's not the same Republican Party anymore. Like, you have a handful of Republicans who are part of this America First movement, and then the rest are all, quote, moderates, which really means they're Democrats.
Yeah.
And I was listening to a clip from Newsmax this morning where they said that these moderate Republicans are blackmailing Speaker McCarthy into doing another damn continuing resolution, because if he doesn't, they'll file the request to kick him out. And then what would happen? The Democrats would be back in control. So this is Republicans threatening this. So they're Democrats. They're just pretending to be Republicans. It is this establishment uniparty. And now that it only takes one member of the House to file for removal of the speaker, they're going to use it as blackmail. So these handful of Republicans that actually are America first can't get anything accomplished because the majority of the party is the establishment uniparty. And I'm just so sick and tired of seeing our country fall, and these idiots can't get on the same page. Like, at least Democrats have a plan and they stick together and they vote together no matter what. And unfortunately, the Republicans are so divided that none of them end up getting anything done. And so the Democrats end up winning, even though they're in the minority. And it's so aggravating.
Yeah, that's why we are involved in this authoritarian, totalitarian regime.
Yeah, we are. I feel like I need a drink when we talk about this stuff because it's maddening. And then the other reason that I need a drink is because the freaking border. We got to talk about this because it's like you always say, Tara, when you think things couldn't get bad enough, like something else happens, and you're like, is this real? Like, this sounds like a movie. So when things can't get any crazier in New York City with the migrant crisis, they've now taken a facility with 288 beds that was reserved for senior citizens, and they're handing it over to house migrants. And that just like, I mean, my God, this is crossing the line. And a lot of people were upset. They actually had people protesting in the streets, and it led to some people getting arrested. And it's just crazy. It's like, first, they thought it was a good idea to house these illegal migrants in school gymnasiums while kids were there. Then they thought it was a good idea to have New York legal citizens take in illegal migrants into their spare bedrooms. Then they kicked veterans to the curb so that they could house the migrants. And now poor elderly grandma and grandpa are being thrown out like the trash so that they can house these illegal people. Like, this is insane.
Okay, but you know that this is one of my favorite topics because the situation, especially in New York City, just gets more and more ludicrous and more out of hand every week. And I have so many updates on this just from the past few days. Like, I don't know if you saw this, but New York City is also housing migrants in dorm rooms at private colleges. There are apparently 50 migrant families that are already living in dorms at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, known as the AMDA. And then I guess
That's
more.
got to be a super liberal school, by the way.
Yeah, more than, yeah, it has to be. And then there's also plans to house them at Columbia University. And even though classes start on October 23rd, these migrant families are going to be staying in the dorms for the entire fucking school year. And what's even more fascinating to me, or disturbing, the AMDA is getting paid very well by the city of New York to kick out their students and house migrant families instead. I read an article in USA Today that this college signed a multi-million-dollar contract with the city of New York earlier this summer to move students out of the dorms on their Upper West Side facility, and that this is a multi-year contract that is reportedly valued at more than $109 million.
Okay, I have so much I want to say about this. Okay, first of all, it's like I'm kind of laughing on the inside because the Upper West Side, Columbia, like these are super liberal people that are sending their kids there. So yeah, go ahead and see what your policies are doing. Now your kid, instead of staying in a dorm, good luck trying to find an apartment on the Upper West Side of New York City that a college kid can afford. But like, do you know how pissed I'd be if I was spending an insane amount of money sending my kid to a private college only to learn that there's illegal migrants there? And not only that, but I would be really concerned about their safety because we've seen the videos and like 90% of them are single men. And I would be like terrified that they're not safe. Like, what if they get assaulted on campus or something? So the whole thing, like if I was a parent sending my kid to these universities, I'd pull them out immediately and send them somewhere else.
Oh, yeah, but it gets so much worse. So this past Monday, Governor Hochul, Hochul, whatever her name is, she
Hochul.
announced that she's deploying, and she's already deployed the National Guard, but now she's going to deploy 150 additional National Guard because of this migrant crisis in New York. And there was an article in the National Review that revealed that the total number of National Guard assigned to the New York migrant crisis is 2,200 guardsmen. And Hochul has stated that 250 of them are going to be tasked solely with case management for Venezuelans.
Okay, I have a quick question. Didn't Abbott try to deploy the National Guard and then the Biden administration like sued him and was like, you can't do that or something?
But
I
that's
swear.
that's Texas.
Yeah.
You can't do that in red
You
state.
you can't do it in Texas,
Yeah.
only in blue states. Got it. Got
Yeah.
it. Silly
Yeah.
me.
And I don't think we mentioned this on the podcast, but last week, the Biden administration announced that they're granting temporary legal status to 500,000 illegal migrants from Venezuela so that they can get work permits. Like, isn't that nice? And so Hochul has stated last week that she's, in addition to all of these guardsmen, she's pulling 70 state personnel employees from the New York Department of Labor so that they can work with these migrants who want to get work authorizations. What the fuck?
Yeah.
And then this is where it gets even better. So New York City is also going to be housing migrants in a national park. And surprisingly, this move is not led by Mayor Adams, it's led by the Biden administration. So there was an article in the Washington Times that the National Park Service signed an agreement to lease Floyd Bennett Field, which is part of the Gateway National Recreation Area in Brooklyn. And they're going to lease this field to create a tent city to house up to 7,500 adult male migrants.
Okay, women should not be like hiking or going in this national park at all because that's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, no, it's so much worse. It's so much worse. So there are normally like very stringent EPA regulations required by the National Environmental Policy Act whenever it comes to a national recreation area and especially national parks. And so this is something that is like very heavily touted by the Biden administration, but they're bypassing their own rules and going ahead with this anyway. And on top of that, they have no idea how to police the area. There's several ball fields there. They do hay rides. They have a funking children's petting zoo. And they're going to house all these single men there. Oh, and also, there's no infrastructure in this camp to even supply water. And then on top of that, it's in a fucking flood zone. So it's
my God.
This is a disaster waiting to happen, right? And as we've been seeing like more and more frequently, even Democrats in the sanctuary city of New York are up in arms. And it seems like, I guess, this whole plan to house these migrants in the national park, a lot of people didn't know about it. I read that Assemblywoman Jamie Williams, she is the Democratic rep for this area in Brooklyn, and she was complaining that she and her constituents were left out of all conversations in making this decision. And she said, like, there's no jobs there, there's no food there, there's like nothing there. And like, how can these decisions be made at a level where like local electeds read about it or they hear about it on the news, but they were never told about it? And then apparently this decision was made without concern for the community, because it turns out a lease was signed 2 weeks ago, granting the city 1 year of use for this area as a migrant tent city, and they have the option to lease the park again for a second year. And even Mayor Adams said that leasing this land for migrants is a poor substitute for Biden delivering more, quote, fundamental solutions, like maybe closing the fucking border. And yet Adams still stands by New York City being a sanctuary city. However, last week he did announce that adult migrants can now only stay in shelters for 30 days instead of 60 days. And I'm not done yet because I have more. So I have to bring up what dipshit AOC said last week in a video on Instagram. I don't know if you saw.
Oh God, this will be good. No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's amazing. She said she was comparing the New York City migrant crisis to immigrants arriving on Ellis Island. And I was going to play the clip, but I didn't get it set up, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to tell you what she said. She said, quote, "The numbers, when it comes to people coming to New York City today, are nothing. I'm telling you nothing compared to the daily amounts of people that we saw coming through Ellis Island in the first half of last century. More than 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island between 1892 and 1954. We had just seen huge numbers of people coming in per day that far eclipsed what we're seeing right now." Stephanie, like, oh my God, is she really this fucking stupid?
Okay, my grandma came through to Ellis Island, and you want to know what? Back then, before the internet, she had to have a job lined up. She had to leave her children with her mother so that she could come and work and be able to support herself and get her citizenship before she could bring over her family. And now these dipshits are just like coming in illegally. They're getting everything they want, healthcare, housing. I mean, it's a slap in the face to all of these people that have immigrated here throughout the years that had to go through so much turmoil to become citizens. And like, she's a
Yeah.
fucking idiot.
And they were given nothing for free.
Nothing,
They got here and
nothing.
then they were left to their own devices. And I
And they
do.
had to learn how to speak the language too, I might add.
Yeah. And I want to point out a post from conservative commentator Ashley St. Clair. I've not heard of her, but she responded to AOC's video and she said, quote, "Girl math is saying immigrants coming legally through Ellis Island is the same as 3 million undocumented migrants pouring through our border and costing New York City $1 million to house migrants in free hotels," because that's exactly the truth. And then here's something else that's just fun. So Bloomberg reported that New York City is planning a new tactic to dissuade migrants from coming to New York. And so, what they're going to do is they're going to distribute flyers in English and Spanish to migrants that are in shelters and at the border in Texas, telling people that New York City's resources are exhausted and that migrants won't be able to find work there. And so, apparently, the flyer specifically warns, quote, "You will not be placed in a hotel. NYC is one of the most expensive cities in the world. You are better off going to a more affordable city."
That's going to work. That,
Right.
a flyer that's totally going to stop the flow of migrants. Yeah.
Right. Just grab one
Good,
as you're
good
running
idea.
across the border.
Right.
And like, did you know the city, New York City, pays $387 a day to
A
shelter
day?
a day? Yeah. 387 a day.
I would love to have $387 a day. Like, are you kidding me? What about all of the homeless people in New York City that are citizens? I'm sure they don't get $387 a day.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's so out of control. And like between the money we're spending on these migrants and then the Ukrainian people and protecting their border, like people should be out in the streets protesting at this point. Yet no one is. Congress isn't doing shit. And it's already gotten like so out of hand. And what I want to know is like, when are we going to stop paying taxes? Like
Right.
people have been posting this on TikTok and they're like, we're funding this rogue government that refuses to protect our borders and help our own people, putting us at risk. We have a president accused of bribery and treason, and he's meanwhile persecuting and prosecuting his political opponents. Like, when is enough going to be enough? And like, why are we still funding this government with our taxes?
Wasn't there supposed to be some kind of like don't go to work day in September? Like, was whatever happened to that?
Yeah, so I don't really know exactly what happened, but apparently, like, it turned into some kind of like left wing type of thing. So a lot of people like jumped off that and they were like, we're going to have to do a lot more than like not go to work for one day, But that's just it. I think like everybody wants to do something, but no one wants to be the first and nobody knows what to do. And so now the whole thing is like, I'm just going to stop paying my taxes. But it's like, yeah, well, they'll probably throw you in jail just like the January 6th people, but
Right.
whatever. Oh, one more thing about New York that I totally forgot about until you were talking about them, which it's so funny. I feel like you with New York is like me with Maui.
Oh,
Um,
totally.
but I had heard today that the new city of New York is encouraging every resident in New York City to carry Narcan, which is basically like if you're overdosing, you like jab that into your leg or whatever, and it's supposed to help revive you. They want every citizen, whether you're a drug user or not, because fentanyl is so out of control, you could get it accidentally, like just being out and about.
Yeah, we had to carry that as cops. We had to carry
That's
that.
insane that you have to worry about that, like touching it or it
Yeah.
being in your drink or your like insane. So that's where we're at in New York. Now, I wanted to just quickly touch on something going on down by you, Tara, in Texas, because I think it's like kind of good news, but I'm not really sure. So the Texas Republican Party has asked for legislation to be added to a special session to prevent further settlement of illegal migrants in Colony Ridge. And we did an episode on this place a while back. It's that 60 square mile development, and they have like 50 to 75,000 illegal migrants. And it's located in Plum, Texas. And I have heard so many stories about this place of just horrible crimes, of people like just being shot in the street. There was a 14-year-old girl who was murdered, yet no one will call the police for help because of fears of being deported. And so the crime is like out of control there. And Republicans have called on Attorney General Ken Paxton to further investigate Colony Ridge and any connection that it has to politicians, since like these politicians have continued letting this problem just get completely out of control. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's a good thing, until they said Ken Paxton. Like, I don't know how he's going to be able to do any of this, because we just did an episode on him being like impeached or whatever, and he's not even allowed into his office. So I don't know like how any of that's going to get done, if this is just for show or what. But when all of this happened with Ken Paxton, he revealed how Democrats really control Texas politics. And that's kind of when I started to realize, like, maybe that's why Texas hasn't done more to stop this, like in terms of like Abbott and like we just talked about with like the National Guard and stuff, maybe because there's just so many Democrats in control. I don't know, Tara. I don't know what you think.
But I think that's kind of changing, because I think it was just last week that the mayor of Dallas, Eric Johnson, who's like been a Democrat his whole career, he just announced that he was changing his party affiliation last Friday, and that he's going to be voting in the Republican primary next spring. And apparently that makes Dallas the largest city in the country with a GOP mayor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Man, he's like got to be the third or fourth person in the last several months that has switched parties. And that's what I meant like in the beginning with this whole Joe Biden thing. I think in a way it's going to help Republicans, because things have just gotten so out of hand. Even Democrats have to admit something's going on here, you know?
And that's big for Dallas. So
Oh, yeah.
if we could get Austin on board.
That'll probably,
Yeah.
well, I shouldn't, you never say never. It could happen.
That's the only thing that would give Texas a really good shot. But
Yeah.
should we even bother to talk about the second round of GOP debates from Wednesday night? And I'll be honest, like I didn't even watch it, but I did read several articles the next morning about how the entire thing was basically like 2 hours of a chaotic shit show where the candidates were all just talking over each other. And I just can't take it seriously. I am so disinterested in what is happening in these GOP debates. I just feel like it's a total waste of time.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't really think it deserves any attention. I will talk about what Trump said regarding the debates, which is that all of the candidates are just simply campaigning for a job, like in his administration. And he's like, they'd be happy to take any job, you know, even like secretary of something. They don't care. They just want a job. And he said how none of them, in his opinion, are worthy of being his VP pick, which kind of surprised me, because I know there's been a lot of talk about possibly Vivek being the VP. And I'm hoping that that means RFK Jr. will be his VP, but I know it's a long stretch, but I'm still holding out for that. And I think the mainstream media is panicking because no one cares. Like, I didn't even know the debates were going on. Like, no one's watching them. People that did go or watch it, they said that the audience was like on their phone the entire time. Like, no, it's so not something anyone's interested in. And I think Twitter or X or whatever is like replacing the mainstream news outlets.
Yeah. And like the Trump hasn't been to either of these two debates. And so that's what everybody wants to see is Trump. And he's not even going. So who cares?
Exactly. And no. I heard a clip on a podcast today from the debates. And I mean, I didn't watch them, but it sounded like the whole time they were just complaining how Trump wasn't there. It's like everyone is so like needs their Trump fix. Meanwhile, Trump held a rally and he was like, I bet you there's 10,000 people standing outside because it was indoors. And he's right. Like nobody cares about these debates. And he knows that. And he knows they just want him there because he'll bring the audience and then they can spend their whole time trying to make him look bad.
Yep.
So, yeah, like I think he's right. These guys, they're wanting to become part of his cabinet or whatever. And I think he's just loving that they look like fools right now. So anyhow, we don't really need to get into that because it was uneventful. But I'm sure we'll have more, hopefully we will have more on Monday around this shutdown and a final answer of like what's going on. So everyone stay tuned. We'll keep you posted and see you back here on Monday. Have a great weekend and